Good morning, good morning. All right. Continuing on with LDS stories of faith and courage. And this time we've got the story of Gibson the Imposter by W.M. Clough. This is a true account of Gibson the Imposter who failed in his bold schemes to deceive the Hawaiian Saints. So again, if you read the Saints, which is a history put out by the church, I'm wondering, I think they cover this, but let's see how it's put here. I think it's fascinating. So, in the summer and autumn of 1857, the United States Army was marching toward Utah, evidently with hostile intentions towards its people. It was thought wisdom by the authorities of the church to concentrate the strength of the saints for any emergency by calling home the elders that were on foreign missions. When the last of the elders from Utah left the Hawaiian Islands on the 1st of May, 1858, the care of the saints on each of the islands was entrusted to a native elder, Kailihune was appointed to preside over the gathering place on Lanai. He was among the first fruits of the labors of the elders, and for a long time had been very efficient and faithful. During our difficulties with the government, Walter M. Gibson, an adventurer, came to Utah. His ostensible object was to induce President Young and the general church authorities to remove our people en masse to the East India Islands. He painted in glowing colors the splendid facilities and opportunities those islands offered for the immigration and colonization by an enterprising and industrious people like the Latter Day Saints. In his ignorance, he supposed that the object of the founder and leaders of the church was to found a powerful and independent nation. The object of these schemes was evidently his own personal aggrandizement. Wow. It had no doubt been a favorite project of his for years to found a government somewhere on the islands of the Pacific Ocean. Failing in his scheme for the removal of the church, and some other plan must be devised for the accomplishment of his cherished purpose. He professed to become a convert to our faith and was baptized into the church. He then requested to be sent on a mission to the Polynesian Islands. He desired a roving commission from the presidency of the church, authorizing him to travel and preach on any or all of the islands in the Pacific Ocean. Before leaving Salt Lake City, Mr. Gibson made it a specialty to converse with the elders who had lately returned from the Hawaii Islands. He sought to be well informed on the general condition of the islands, the customs, traditions, and general character of the natives, and especially did he seek to be well informed as to the numbers, organization, location, and general condition of the native saints. His object in this developed afterwards. When he left Utah, he went directly to the Hawaiian Islands. He soon found some of the saints and represented to them that he had been sent by President Young, not only to take charge of the mission on those islands, but to preside over all the churches that might be raised up on any of the Pacific Islands, and in that capacity that he was equal to and entirely independent of President Young. The native saints had been left about 2 years to themselves. They were naturally simple and credulous, and it was easy to impose upon them. As soon as Mr. Gibson acquired some knowledge of the native language, he commenced traveling among the branches of the church and grafted on to the gospel many of the old traditions and superstitions of the Hawaiians. He recognized the church, or more properly speaking, reconstructed it in accordance with his own notions throughout the islands. He was one of those characters of whom the Apostle Peter warned the saints in his day, and though covetous shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you. He ordained 12 apostles and charged them $150 each for initiating them into the office. priestcraft, and charged his high priests, 70s, etc., proportionately according to the presumed importance of the office. By this and other impositions, he succeeded in raising sufficient means for the purchase of 1/2 of the island of Lanai. Some years before, the elders had leased the same tract of land. Hallelujah, a native chief, for the temporary gathering place for the saints. Mr. Gibson represented to the saints that he was securing the land for them, but that it would have to be deeded to him for them. For the accomplishment of his purpose, concentration and organization were necessary. He continued to gather the saints to Lanai. There he organized all the males, old and young, into companies and daily drilled them in the art of war. He informed them that as soon as they were properly disciplined, it was his intention to build or purchase a vessel, equip it, and sail for one of the South Sea Islands. He would seek a favorable opportunity, conquer the natives, and leave some of his disciplined men in the charge of the conquered territory and fill up his depleted ranks with raw recruits. In this way, he designed to conquer one island after another until he organized a large fleet and subjugated all the Polynesian islands. Thus, he hoped to realize his wildest dream by organizing, as he expressed it, one great grand empire that would be able to take its place among the leading nations of the earth. His every act, from the time of his arrival in Utah, had been designed for his own aggrandizement. He had learned nothing of the spirit and power of the gospel. The Lord is establishing his kingdom, and he was fighting against it. If he has not already done so, he will yet realize the truth of the saying of the Savior in his teachings when on his earthly mission. He likened the kingdoms of God to a stone and said, "Whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it may fall, it will grind him to powder." Notwithstanding, the saints had been gradually led astray by Mr. Gibson. They felt that his teachings and practices were not the same as those of the elders who had labored among them before his coming. Fearing they might be deceived, some 8 of the native elders wrote to the brethren in Utah who had labored for many years among them. They stated some of the facts concerning Mr. Gibson's course and asked for advice. This communication was translated and submitted to President Young. The first presidency then decided that Apostles E.T. Benson and Lorenzo Snow should visit the islands, and that Elders Joseph F. Smith, Alma L. Smith, and myself, who had previously been on missions to the islands and understood the native language, should accompany them. We arrived at Honolulu, in the capital of the islands, about the 27th of March, 1864. On the 29th, we sailed for Lahaina on the schooner Nettie Merrill. Captain Fisher for the island, the schooner Nettie Merrill. Captain Fisher for the islands of Maui, a distance of about 90 miles from Honolulu. On the morning of the 31st of March, we came to anchor about 1 mile from the mouth of the little harbor of Lahaina. Apostles Ezra T. Benson, Lorenzo Snow, Brother Alma L. Smith, and myself got into the small boat to go ashore. Brother Joseph F. Smith, as he afterwards stated, had some misgivings about going in that boat, but the manifestation was not sufficiently strong to indicate any general accident. He preferred to remain on board the vessel until the boat returned. The boat started for the shore. It contained some barrels and boxes, the captain, a white man, 2 or 3 natives passengers, and the boat's crew, who were also natives. The entrance to the harbor is a very narrow passage between coral reefs, and when the sea is rough, it is very dangerous on account of the breakers. Where the vessel lay, the sea was not rough, but only presented the appearance of heavy swells rolling to the shore. As we approached the reef, it was evident to me that the surf was running higher than we anticipated. I called the captain's attention to the fact. We were running quartering across the waves, and I suggested that we change our course so as to run at right angles with them. He replied that he did not think there was any danger, and our course was not changed. We went but little farther when a heavy swell struck the boat and carried us before it about 50 yards. When the swell passed, it left us in a trough between huge waves. It was too late to retrieve our error, and we must run our chances. When the second swell struck the boat, it raised the stern so high that the seaman's oars was out of the water, and he lost control of the boat. It rode on the swell a short distance and swung around just as the wave began to break. We were almost instantly capsized into the dashing, foaming sea. I felt no concern for myself about drowning, for while on my former mission I had learned to swim in and sport in the surf of those shores. The last I remembered of Brother Snow, as the boat was going over, I saw him seize the upper edge of it with both hands, fearing that the upper edge of the boat or barrels might hit and injure me as the boat was going over. I plunged head foremost into the water. After swimming a short distance, I came to the surface without being strangled or injured. The boat was bottom upwards, and barrels and hats and umbrellas were floating in every direction. I swam to the boat, and there was nothing to cling to on the bottom. I reached under and seized the edge of it. About the same time, Brother Benson came up near me, and I readily got hold of the boat. The natives soon appeared and swam about quite unconcerned for their own safety. Brother Alma L. Smith came up on the opposite side of the boat from Brother Benson and myself. He was considerably strangled and succeeded in securing a hold on the boat. A short time afterwards, the captain was discovered about 50 yards from us. 2 of his sailors swam to his assistance, and 1 on each side succeeded in keeping him on the surface, although life was apparently extinct. Nothing yet had been seen of Brother Snow, although the natives had been swimming and diving in every direction in search of him. We were only about 1/4 of a mile from shore. The people, as soon as they discovered our circumstances, manned a lifeboat and hurried to the rescue. We were taken into the boat where the crew wanted to row for the shore and picked up the captain on the way. We told them that one of our friends was yet missing, and we did not want to leave as long as there were any possibility of a chance to render him assistance. We discovered that a second boat had left the shore and could reach the captain as soon as the one we were in. Seeing this, the crew of the boat we were in consented to remain and assist us. The captain was taken ashore, and by working over him some time was brought to life. The life of Captain Fisher would not probably have been much endangered, except for a sack of flour of $400 or $500 in silver, which he held in his hand. This he clung to with great tenacity. When the boat capsized, the weight of it took him at once to the bottom. The natives dove and brought him up, still clinging to the sack. When his vitality was restored, the first thing he inquired about was the money, intimating to the natives with peculiar emphasis that it would not have been healthy for them to have lost it. Brother Snow had not yet been discovered, and the anxiety was intense. The natives were evidently doing all in their power. Finally, one of them, in edging himself around the capsized boat, must have felt Brother Snow with his feet and pulled him, at least partly, from under it. As the first I saw of Brother Snow was his hair floating on the water, as the native was dragging him through the water around the end of the capsized boat. As soon as we got him into our boat, we told the boatman to pull for the shore with all possible speed. His body was stiff, and life was evidently extinct. Brother Alma L. Smith and myself were sitting side by side. We laid Brother Snow across our laps, and on the way to shore we quietly administered to him and asked the Lord to spare his life, that he might return to his family and home. On reaching the shore, we carried him a little way to some large empty barrels that were lying on the sandy beach. We laid him face downward on these and rolled him back and forth until we succeeded in getting the water that he had swallowed out of him. During this time, a number of persons came down from the town. Among them was Mr. E.P. Adams, a merchant. All were willing to do what they could. We washed Brother Snow's face with camphor, furnished by Mr. Adams. We did not only what was customary in such cases, but also what the Spirit seemed to whisper to us. After working over him for some time without any indications of returning life, the bystanders said that nothing more could be done for him, but we did not feel like giving him up, and still prayed and worked over him with an assurance that the Lord would hear and answer our prayers. Finally, we were impressed to place our mouth over his and make an effort to inflate his lungs, alternately blowing in and drawing air out, imitating as far as possible the natural process of breathing. This we persevered in until we succeeded in inflating his lungs. After a little, there were very faint indications of returning vitality, a slight wink of an eye, which until then had been open and death-like, and very faint rattle in the throat. There were the first symptoms of returning life. These grew more and more distinct until consciousness was fully restored. When this result was reached, it must have been fully an hour after the capsizing of the boat. A Portuguese man living... Wow. A Portuguese man living in Lahaina who, from the first, rendered us much assistance, invited us to take Brother Snow to his house. There being no saints in the place, we gladly accepted his kind offer. Every possible attention was given to Brother Snow's comfort. Persons in danger and excitement often see things a little differently. The following is Apostle Snow's account of the capsizing of the boat. As we were moving along with some half a mile from the point we were expected to land, my attention was suddenly arrested by Captain Fisher, calling to the oarsman in a voice which denoted some alarm. "Hurry up, hurry up!" I quickly discovered the cause of the alarm. A short distance behind us, I saw an immense surf, 30 or 40 feet high, rushing towards us swifter than a racehorse. We had scarcely a moment for reflection before the huge mass was upon us. In an instant, our boat, with its contents, as though it were only a feather, was hurled into the briny water, and we were under this rolling, seething mountain wave. This was certainly unexpected. It took me by surprise. I think, however, that I soon comprehended the situation, that we were in the midst of the turbulent wet waters, a quarter of a mile from shore, without much probability of receiving human aid. I felt confident, however, that there would be some way of escape, that the Lord would provide the means, for it was not possible that my life and mission were thus to terminate. This reliance on the Lord banished fear, and inspired me with hope up to the last moment of consciousness. Having been somewhat subject to fainting spells, I believe that after a few moments in the water I must have fainted, as I did not suffer the pain common in the experience of drowning persons. I had been in the water only a few moments until I lost consciousness. The first I knew afterwards, I was on shore receiving the kind of tender attentions of my brethren. The first recollection I have of returning consciousness was seeing a very small light, the smallest imaginable. This soon disappeared, and I was again in total darkness. Again it appeared much larger than before, then sank away and left me, as before, in forgetfulness. Thus it continued to come and go until finally I recognized, as I thought, persons whispering, and soon after I asked in a feeble whisper, "What is the matter?" I immediately recognized the voice of Elder Clough, as he replied, "You've been drowned. The boat upset in the surf." Quick as lightning, this scene of our disaster flashed upon my mind. I immediately asked, "Are you brethren all safe?" The emotion that was awakened in my bosom by the answer of Elder Clough will remain as long as life continues. "Brother Snow, we are all safe." I rapidly recovered and very soon was able to walk and accompany the brethren to our lodgings. As soon as Brother Snow was out of danger, it occurred to me that I had better return to the vessel. As I reached the deck by the rope ladder over its side, I saw at a glance that Brother Smith was under great anxiety of mind. We were both under an intensity of feeling which men usually experience only a few times in their lives. Brother Smith had been informed by a native that the captain and an elderly white man were drowned. The latter he supposed to be Brother Benson, hence his great anxiety. My own nervous system was strung up to an extreme tension by the events of the past 2 hours. When I told Brother Smith that all were safe, the sudden revulsion of feeling almost overcame him. We rejoiced together that through the merciful providence and the faith that had been bestowed upon us, we were all alive. On the 2nd of April, Brother Snow had so far recovered his strength that it was thought best to pursue our journey. We hired some natives to take us in an open boat across the channel, 16 miles to Lanai. We arrived at the landing place 3 miles from the village, just at dark. We sent a messenger to Mr. Gibson with the request that he would send down some saddle horses for us to ride up in the morning. Early the following morning, April 3rd, the horses were ready for us. An hour's ride over a rough and rocky road brought us to the settlement. Our reception by Mr. Gibson and most of the native saints was cool and formal. Cool and very formal. Many improvements had been made since our last visit that were praiseworthy and reflected great credit on Mr. Gibson. After breakfast, Apostles Benson and Snow engaged in conversation with Mr. Gibson on the affairs of the mission. That day and the following were principally spent in laboring with Mr. Gibson and native elders to get them, if possible, to see the condition they were in. During this time, brothers Joseph F. Smith, Alma L. Smith, and myself took a ride around the valley accompanied by Mr. Gibson's daughter as our guide. About 1/2 a mile from Mr. Gibson's residence was a large rock, the top several feet above the ground. Mr. Gibson had a chamber cut into this rock, in which he had deposited a Book of Mormon and other things, and called it the cornerstone of a great temple, which would be erected there. A framework of poles had been constructed in a circular form around this rock, and thus was covered with brush. Mr. Gibson, by appealing to the pagan superstition of the natives, made them believe that this spot was sacred, and if any person touched it, he would be struck dead. So much faith had the daughter of Mr. Gibson in the teachings of her father, that she related apparently in good faith the circumstances of a hen flying upon the booth and immediately falling down dead. Notwithstanding the protest of Miss Gibson that it was very dangerous to do so, we went inside of the bush structure and examined the rock and came out unharmed. We were further informed that Mr. Gibson had succeeded in surrounding his own person and residence with such a halo of sacredness that in the minds of the natives that they always entered his house on their hands and knees. This was repeated on other occasions. It was the old customary way in which the natives had been in the habit of paying respect to their kings, and the custom had been revived by Mr. Gibson in order to increase his personal prestige. We had previously learned that the Saints would assemble in the conference on the 6th of April at 10 o'clock a.m. They had assembled in the meeting house. We all started to go in when Mr. Gibson made some excuse for returning to his house. We went and took our seats on the stand. The house was well filled. In a few minutes, Mr. Gibson made his appearance. As soon as he entered the door, the entire congregation instantly rose to their feet and remained standing until he was seated on the stand. The execution of this act of reverence evincing long and careful training. Mr. Gibson had doubtless delayed his entrance to make a fitting opportunity for this exhibition. He entirely ignored the presence of the apostles, and after the people were seated, arose and gave out the opening hymn. This act gave evidence at once that he had no proper idea of the organization and authority of the priesthood. Seeing this, President Benson called on me to pray. Without giving any time for consultation, as soon as the second hymn was sung, Mr. Gibson arose to his feet and commenced to address the congregation in substance as follows. My dear red-skinned brethren, sisters, and friends, I presume you are all wondering and anxious to know why these strangers have come so suddenly among us without giving us any notice of their coming. I will assure you of one thing, my red-skinned friends. When I find out, I will be sure to let you know, for I am your father, and I will protect you in your rights. These strangers may say they are your friends, but let me remind you how, when they lived here years ago, they lived upon your very scanty substance. Did they make any such improvements as you see I have made? Did I not come here and find you without a father, poor and discouraged? Did I not gather you together here and make all these improvements that you today enjoy? Now, you, my red-skinned friends, must decide who your friend and father is, whether it is these strangers or I, who have done so much for you. When he took his seat, President Benson requested Brother Joseph F. Smith to talk, rather intimating that it was desirable to speak on general principles, and that he need not feel bound to notice all that Mr. Gibson had said. It seemed impossible for any man to speak with greater power and demonstration of the Spirit. He referred to the saints, to the labors of Brother George Buchanan, the first elders who brought them the gospel. He reminded them of the facts which the older saints were well acquainted, the great disadvantage the elders labored under, and the privations they suffered in first preaching the gospel on the island. how they slept in their then miserable huts, and lived as they lived, how they traveled on foot in storms and in bad weather from village to village, and from house to house, exposing health and life, how they went destitute of clothing, and what had been in the habit of considering the necessaries of life, to bring them the blessings of the gospel, without money and without price. He asked by what right Mr. Gibson called himself the father of the people, and the elders who faithfully labored to establish them. Thank you, dear.
Have a sandwich.
I appreciate it. A delivery of sandwich, sorry. They went from house to house, exposing health and life, destitute of clothing, and what had been the habit of considering the necessities of life, to bring them the blessings of the gospel without money and without price. He asked by what right Mr. Gibson called himself the father of the people, and the elders who faithfully labored to establish them in the gospel, strangers. The spirit and power that accompanied Brother Smith's remarks astonished the saints and opened their eyes. They began to see how they had been imposed upon. Every word he spoke found a response in their hearts, as was plainly manifest by their eager looks and animated countenances. There was another meeting in the afternoon in which the Apostles Benson and Snow addressed the saints. Their remarks were interpreted by Elder Joseph F. Smith. On the 7th, there was a meeting in the forenoon. A priesthood meeting was appointed for the evening, and the conference adjourned sine die, or sine die. I'm not sure what that means. This is why I love reading older books. There's a lot of information that is just no longer used, but still wonderful to learn. S-I-N-E-D-I-E. What is that phrase? Adjournment, sindai, is a Latin phrase meaning without day, used to describe the final adjournment or legislative session. Oh, okay. So, and the conference would adjourn sindai. Okay, so that'd be just the last one on the 7th. In the meeting of the priesthood in the evening was well attended, as it was understood that Mr. Gibson's course would be investigated. The complaints that were made by the native elders in the communication that led to our present mission were read, and Mr. Gibson was called on to make an answer to the charges. In addition to nearly a repetition of his harangue in the meeting on the day previous, his reply consisted of a bombastic display of some letters of appointments and recommendations from President Young, to which attached large seals, bedecked with a variety of colored ribbons, to give them an air of importance and official significance in the eyes of unsophisticated natives. Oh my gosh. This guy. Oh! These papers he held up before the people, and pointing to them said with great emphasis, "Here is my authority, which I received direct from President Brigham Young. I don't hold myself accountable to these men," meaning the apostles, and those who came with him. There had been no other proof of the wrong course of Mr. Gibson. That remark was sufficient to satisfy the brethren that their plain duty was, and they acted promptly on the matter. Apostle E.T. Benson followed Mr. Gibson. He reviewed Mr. Gibson's past course and showed that in making merchandise of the offices of the priesthood, introducing the former pagan superstitions of the people for the purpose of obtaining power, and his idea of establishing a temporal and independent kingdom on the Pacific Isles, there were all in antagonism to the plan laid down in the gospel for the redemption of man. The spirit manifested by Mr. Gibson proved that he was ignorant of the powers of the priesthood, or that he ignored them for purely selfish motives. What they had seen and heard since their arrival proved that the complaints made by the native elders in their letters to Utah were correct, as far as they went, but half had not been told. Brother Benson's remarks were interpreted, after which it was motioned that Mr. Gibson's course be disapproved. When this was put to a vote, all but one of the native elders voted against the motion. This showed that Mr. Gibson still retained a strong hold on the minds of the saints. Notwithstanding this show of strong opposition, Brother Snow arose, and in his remarks prophesied that Mr. Gibson would see the time that not one of the saints would remain with him. Brother Joseph F. Smith remarked that among the scores of elders who had labored on the islands, none had been so utterly wanting in the spirit and power of the gospel as to change the saints anything for conferring on them the blessings of the priesthood, till Walter M. Gibson came, and had the presumption to claim that he had a right to ordain apostles and high priests for a price, for money. The apostles informed Mr. Gibson and the saints that when they left the islands for home, Elder Joseph F. Smith would be left in charge of the mission, that all those who wished to be considered in good standing in the church should leave Lanai and return to their homes on the other islands, where the branches would be reorganized and set in order by brethren who would be left for that purpose. The next day we returned to Lahaina, where we held a council and cut Mr. Gibson off from the church. We returned to Honolulu, and about 8 days after, Apostles Snow and Benson took passage on the bark onward for San Francisco. Brother Snow's prophecy was literally fulfilled. The saints all left Mr. Gibson and returned to their former homes, as they had been counseled to do. The last one to leave him was Kaili Hune, the elder who had been left to preside over the place of the gathering on Lanai. He finally rejoined the church. All the plans of Mr. Gibson were completely frustrated. He is a prominent example of the nothingness of man when he attempts to battle against the kingdom of God. When the elders were called home in 1858, there had not been time to do much in gathering the saints, as Mr. Gibson had succeeded in obtaining a personal title to the land, leased for that purpose, on the island of Lanai. Brothers Benson and Snow advised the elders who remained to notice in their travels what appeared to them the best places for this purpose, that when the time came for it, a good selection might be made. On the island of Oahu, near the seashore, lived a white man by the name of Doherty. He did not belong to the church, but was friendly to the saints, and the elders frequently shared his hospitality. Between his house and the sea beach was a piece of ground where grew a very dense thicket of large shrub of a peculiar growth. Through this were the paths made by the people and their domestic animals. Into this thicket the elders, when there were in the habit of daily retiring to pray. One day, when I was walking along one of these paths, I saw President Young approach me. Said he, "This is the place to gather the native saints to." He seemed to fully comprehend the surroundings, and in that easy, familiar way so characteristic of him, indicated the advantages of the afforded for a settlement, no matter what my bodily condition might have been at the time. The apparent meeting was in the open air and in the broad light of day. It was as real to me as any fact of my life. I saw the facilities of the place as he represented them, and ever afterwards that appeared to me the best place on the island for the gathering of the saints. We remained on the islands about 6 months before the elders arrived from Utah, and we were released to return home. When we arrived in San Francisco, we met elders F. A. Hammond and George Nebeker on their way to the Hawaiian Islands. They had instructions to visit and carefully examine all the islands and make the best possible location that could be made available to establish a place for the gathering of the saints. I was afterward informed that they faithfully carried out their instructions, and at last decided that the place to which I have referred on the island of Oahu was the best for the purpose. It was purchased, and many of the saints are now gathered there. They have an extensive sugar plantation where the labor is provided for them, and every possible facility is afforded for their advancement. This is an awesome story. It's kind of a twofer story, really. You get the story of President Snow drowning and being revived. President Snow was an amazing apostle and later prophet of the church. And he's one of my favorite. I was always impressed with him as a child because later in his life, he had an experience in the Salt Lake Temple where he told his granddaughter one day when after he was being retrieved from his offices past the celestial room in the Salt Lake Temple, can't remember if he was being retrieved or if he was just coming out and his granddaughter was there. But as they were heading to the central staircase, he pointed to the kind of the top corner of the banister there, and he basically said that, granddaughter, I can't remember her name. This is one thing you should remember. This is the place where I had seen the Lord Jesus Christ standing upon the breastwork of the temple and conversed with the Lord, or something to that effect. So he had seen Jesus Christ in his house and conversed with him. I should really look up that story to remember the details about what he was conversing with him about, and what it was in answer to a sincere prayer of trying to figure something out, I'm sure. But the details escape me. But I was always impressed with Lorenzo Snow. Plus, he had a really killer beard. I mean, it was like, down to this, past his chest. I just liked it a lot. All of the presidents of the church have really amazing stories. So yeah, also being drowned and revived in Hawaii through blessings of the Spirit. God, that an hour. Wow. I'm wondering if those fainting spells did help him. Yikes. That's crazy amazing. Well, the other thing is the story of Mr. Gibson there. That is just astonishing. Every time I hear that. I remember it from earlier presentations of these stories. I can't remember where I heard it first. And then I remember rereading it when I was listening to the Saints. And just every time, I'm just gobsmacked with horror. The audacity, presumptuousness, the hubris, all of it. It just, someone who far tried to exceed his authority, followed by which it's all for his own aggrandizement and gain, and also to line his pockets. Just awful. I'm really glad the Spirit of the Lord was with the Hawaiian Saints to help them come around to the fullness of the gospel. What an amazing way to show, look, when we came to give them the gospel, we came without purse or script to enlighten and to help, to build up the kingdom of God, not a kingdom of a person. Wow. What a difference. What a difference. I think it's very important to remember those things, because I know if I were in that situation, I would not be very happy with that Mr. Gibson at all. I would be very, 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 very upset. I'm very glad that they had the right people in the right place at the right time to say the right things. God's very good with that. Well, the next story is going to be about exploring Arizona for settlement, which is going to be really cool because, like I said, I have got cousins in history about Arizona. And then there's searching for genealogy. That one's nice and short, so it might be that we get those two in tomorrow. Well, maybe not so short. But, I think the biggest thing that I can learn from these stories, at least this one in particular about Hawaii, is that you should trust in the Lord in everything that goes on, because He will help preserve you as you trust in Him through faithfulness for His purposes. He will also help make the pathway clear and in the right way, as long as you are trying to follow the Spirit. So instead of being angry and contentious like I would want to be, it is better to be calm and feel and listen to the Spirit as it dictates what's necessary. Well, with that, I hope that's uplifted you and helped you remember on what course you should stay. And may the Spirit of the Lord be with you. I'll see ya.